We have a major Milwaukee Bucks trade update as a recent report has dropped revealing some very interesting details about their plans surrounding Pat Connaughton. We're going to break that down as well as discuss a Chris Middleton update ahead of the regular season starting next week. Stay tuned for all that in this episode. But before we get into it, quick reminder to hit the subscribe button. We're very close now to 1,000 subscribers. We're less than 80 subscribers away. It's been a big goal of mine for a while. So if you want to help us towards that goal and you're a part of the 80% who aren't subscribed, make sure to hit that subscribe button. But a lot to go over today. The Bucks obviously had a pretty interesting preseason game yesterday, and AJ Johnson had a very rough outing. But the focus on today's video is actually a trade surrounding Pat Connaughton. A recent report has come out revealing the Bucks guard that is the most likely to be traded away. And I've been seeing the comments and I've been seeing the sentiments of a lot of us Bucks fans out there are trade Pat. And quite frankly, it does make a lot of sense at this point. We're going to go over the depth chart and discuss what exactly this report entails now. And you can see basically here, the Bucks are a week away from their season starting. And soon enough, we'll see the team on the hardwood. We know they had a brutal season last year, mainly due to injuries. Pat didn't help in the playoffs at all. Had a pretty rough regular season and especially a really, really bad playoffs. We can see in the third paragraph here. In the meantime, the Bucks will look to compete and improve their team via the trade market if necessary. The Bucks have trade aspirations, and a trade could be in the works if they feel they need an upgrade on their roster. Who could be on the move for Milwaukee? According to Bill DeFilippo and Robbie Calland of Uproxx, guard Pat Connaughton is the likeliest to be traded this season. And this is super interesting. The report is, quote, if the Bucks make a trade to add some reinforcements around Giannis and Dame, the really appealing thing would be their unprotected 2031 first round pick. But to make the money work, some combination of Middleton, Lopez, Portis, and Connaughton will have to go out the door. Lopez is particularly important to what Milwaukee does, and of course, as we all know, so is Bobby Portis. So while part of the trade talks last year is one of the Bucks' emotional leaders, which is Bobby Portis, so is Pat, whose deal has 2 years and $18.8 million left on it with a player option. So you can see this here, and it's also been rumored, which we've covered on the channel, rumored to have been shopped recently by the Bucks, and he seems like he's the most likely to go. So a lot to go over here. Obviously, the report is that among the players the Bucks have, if they're looking to make a big splash, whether it's before the season starts, throughout the season, as we approach a deadline, Pat Connaughton will be the guy who is most likely to be headed out of Milwaukee. And it makes a lot of sense. Obviously, during the playoffs last year, he struggled immensely. He had a really bad playoff, averaging less than 6 points a game, shooting horrible from three in the 20%. And at a time last year during the playoffs where Dame was out, Giannis was dealing with injuries. They really needed somebody to step up, and hopefully it would be him. And he ultimately didn't do that. And he didn't have a great year last year either, like during the regular season. He's been on a bit of a decline, and given the Bucks' current depth chart, they have a lot of available options. And if they want to go ahead and pay a hefty price in the trade market and maybe attach that unprotected first-round pick, which I don't think they're going to do, but if they do that, again, they'll need to match salary, and they're not going to get rid of Bobby Portis, and they're not going to get rid of Brook Lopez. Those are two guys that are pretty integral to their team. Maybe you could argue a Bobby Portis trade could happen, but in all likelihood, that's not going to happen. Pat Connaughton is the most likely player to be shipped out if you are a Milwaukee Bucks. If you're the Milwaukee Bucks. And again, he signed as a free agent in 2018. He's 31. He's averaged 7 points, 4 rebounds, 1.6 assists a game. But again, he's been a part of the core for the past while, but they haven't been able to. Again, this is only the second year with Dame, and he had the worst season of his Bucks tenure since signing that contract last year. And you know, there's a bunch of different mock trades going around. This was one that was recently dropped, a trade involving the Bucks and Chris Dunn. We covered this on this channel a couple weeks ago. Chris Dunn for Pat and a second-round pick in 2031. This isn't the unprotected first. This is a second. And this one is interesting because, again, you're getting a guy like Chris Dunn who would be your backup guard, really good defensively. That is his thing, whether it's steals or just advanced metrics. Everything favors Chris Dunn in being a great defensive guard. There's no doubt about it. Of course, his offense leaves some things to be desired here, but the problem with this trade is that you're not necessarily giving up Connaughton, but also giving up a second-round pick for a guy who obviously is a phenomenal defender, and that is what the Milwaukee Bucks need at this point. They need defense. Their biggest weakness is and has always is going to be defense in the Dame Lillard era unless they make a big splash for a really elite defender, which they haven't done yet. They obviously traded away Drew Holiday, which was their best defender and is one of the best perimeter and one-on-one guards and defenders in the league. But by adding Chris Dunn, you'd at least help negate some of the defense that they lost. You're not going to ever replicate the defense that Drew Holiday bring, but it could help negate some of the defensive lapses and struggles that we saw last season with Dame on the floor, because obviously Dame is not a particularly good defender. He's a pretty bad defender, but obviously that can be made up when you have a very good defender like Giannis. You have a good big man defender, at least regarding protecting the rim, in Brook Lopez, but everybody else is not necessarily defensive minded. And they added Gary Trent Jr., they added Taurean Prince, two capable defenders, but again, neither of those guys, maybe could argue Prince is a plus defender, but neither of those guys are super great defenders. And we rewind back now to June when Evan Siddery said the Bucks have been shopping Pat Connaughton for a more versatile rotation piece. He makes $9.4 million in 2024-2025, which also includes a player option. And due to the second apron limitations, Milwaukee can't aggregate salaries and trades. And again, this was back in June, so some of those aprons and things have been sorted out now. But what stays the same is that if the Bucks, obviously they can't aggregate salaries and trades, but if they want to move off a pick and they want to get rid of their 2020 or 2031 first round pick, they're going to have to attach somebody into that. And Connaughton makes the most sense for this team to trade. And again, the issue is with all of these deals is that A, he's coming off of a down year, so you'd be selling him pretty low. And B, he has about $20 million left, $18.9 million left on his deal over 2 seasons. So any team you're trading him to, in this case the Clippers, you'd have to be very wary of. The team is not going to, you're going to need to attach a pick if you want to get a decent player back. And again, in this case, Kawhi Leonard's out with an injury now. So what the Clippers, they don't have Paul George, obviously, he went to the Sixers. So what the Clippers season has entailed regarding this specific trade could make some more sense if they're trying to gain some assets back and get a second round pick. But again, the question is, do the Bucks want to do that? Because at this point in time, it's still up in the air. Like, you'd probably rather save that second round pick for the deadline and save your first round pick for the deadline when you see what your big issues are. We presume it's going to be defense because their defense has been a problem since they traded away Drew Holiday all of last season, which makes sense. But they have to see what that actually looks like as the regular season goes on, because if they don't wait until the deadline, they make a trade for Chris Dunn now. I agree that it will help with your perimeter defense, but what it won't help with is actually seeing what the problems are, because there is a world that your defense ends up being fine, serviceable, with the additions of Gary Trent Jr., with the additions of Taurean Prince, maybe even a guy like A.J. Johnson, who struggled immensely, went 0 for 11 in yesterday's game. That's back-to-back games now where he's shot horrible from the field. But the biggest thing here is, what will the Bucks do with Pat Connaughton? I see you guys in the comments, you all want him gone. Would you do this trade, Chris Dunn for Pat in a second? And what your thoughts are on the report revealing that he's the likeliest to be traded? Let me know. But one other thing regarding Chris Middleton's health, this dropped yesterday. The question was asked to Doc Rivers, is the goal to get Chris Middleton on the floor for practice before he plays? Rivers said this was obviously before him missing yesterday's game. It would help, obviously, but I'm just going to play it by ear. Chris has proven to me last year that when he comes back, he was 100% ready and he had no practices. There are guys like that, and I would say he'd be one of them. Would I like him to practice a couple times? For sure. Now, obviously, the Bucks didn't play many of their starters yesterday. No Dame, no Giannis, no Chris. We saw A.J. Johnson go out there with Liam Robbins and players like that, and A.J. played really bad. Doc Rivers spoke out and basically said that, at least he's getting minutes, he's getting experience, and he's still struggling, still missing layups, still missing and struggling to finish. But surrounding Chris Middleton, will he be ready for the regular season next week is the biggest question. He's obviously not going to end up playing in the final couple preseason games. Preseason's obviously over now, and he didn't play in the final couple preseason games, so he's not going to get any game action before the regular season starts next week. But hopefully he can heal, get in a couple practices before the season starts, and just go out there and ball. Hopefully on opening night, we have our full roster, and we can see what they can do with the new additions of Gary Trent Jr. and Taurean Prince. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on this, and your thoughts are on all this news. We'll see you guys soon.